I call the meeting of the Springfield Budget Committee to order. Could we have roll call, please?
Counselor Weber.
Here.
Counselor Moe.
Here.
Counselor Rodley.
Here.
Counselor Blackwell.
Here.
Counselor Doyle.
Here.
Counselor Pictionary.
Yes, thank you.
Jason Miller.
Here.
Devin Marche Duncan. Here. Michael Roman.
Here.
Ruth Linos. Here. Arthur Ayer.
Here.
Warren Selby.
Here.
Thank you. As we begin our meeting tonight, I would like to ask members of the audience who are joining us online to please keep yourselves on mute until you are called to provide public testimony. There is a one-time this evening designated for public testimony, and it will be listed as business from the audience on the agenda. If you're attending in person, please complete the request to speak card located near the entrance of the library meeting room and give them to staff. If you're joining us online with a tablet, smartphone, or computer and wish to speak during that time, please use the raise hand option to be called upon to provide comment when the designated time is announced. And the order of the public testimony is as follows. First, we'll call on anyone who is in person at City Hall. Secondly, anyone who has raised their virtual hand. Third, anyone who has submitted email in advance. And fourth, anyone who has submitted written comment via mail in advance. So right now we'll have business from the audience. And please, do we have anyone?
We have no one who has signed up, Chair.
Oh, lovely group. So seeing none, is there anyone on the Zoom call?
Nobody has raised their hand.
Okay, and we already know that there's no mail or email. So we get to get right into it. So right now we get to move into questions and discussions on the budget. This provides an opportunity for the Budget Committee to ask questions of staff or engage in discussion regarding the proposed budget. So are there any questions or topics for discussion regarding the budget that you'd like to bring up?
Are we talking about specific budget sections tonight? You know, sometimes, so why don't could we clarify what sections we're working on tonight?
Actually, we're working on
Open-ended.
open-ended. So without doing the department presentations anymore, what we're doing is just opening up the questions that you have. If it's related to a department, we can bring that director up, and then anyone else has questions for that director, ask them that, and then we'll just kind of proceed through questions.
Thank you.
I do, but I can wait. If anybody else maybe.
It's open-ended, so are there any questions? Go ahead.
My problem with these presentations, there's no numbers. It's just very good presentation. What numbers? We don't have any numbers.
Oh, okay.
Different category. One in particular I'm looking at is fire, as the chief knows, but there's others too. Just isn't enough information. That's all.
And are you referring to the section?
Don't worry about it. That's just.
Okay. Okay, anyone else? Go ahead, Arthur.
So on page 31 of the proposed budget, under financial summaries, item 9 is the ambulance fund, and it mentions that there was an 80% increase in available cash. It's due to an increase in working capital reserves, and I'm wondering, where did that money come from, or how did that work?
It's number 9.
On page 31.
And it's page 31 of 230, maybe. Yeah, I'm on that.
Page.
Maybe that's. Counselor code, yeah, it's a breakdown.
So what you have is, so you start with the beginning cash. So we start on page 29. Going down to the ambulance fund, and then so beginning cash of 378,000. And then you have new revenue coming in of 7.2 million. Expenditures of 6.9 million, which result in a $680,000 ending cash. That's an 80% increase. So it's just that the revenues exceeded the expenditures for the ambulance fund in fiscal year. And the budget fiscal year 25 line, what's proposed to exceed. If we want to have more detail on that, why we're projecting higher revenues, we can bring up the chief or John Follett.
I think maybe where some of the confusion being rest is, we have a copy of the full budget document that's a link on, if you go into tonight, actually it's last night's, agenda, and you scroll down, you can go to the full budget online. We're trying to save trees. And so it's on the document that was posted, it's 29 of 230. When you look at the packet, it says 39 of 240. So that's why it might be a little bit, we'll try to translate like what page of the document it is on, not necessarily on the navigation overall, if that makes sense.
Yeah, just the page number on the bottom of the document as opposed to the PDF.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else? Victoria? No, sir.
Oh, yeah. I've got
Yeah, let him-
a few
okay.
sides.
Oh, go. Keep going.
On the, here on the bottom of page 35 of 230, full document. The risk services, requirements went up from about 2.7 million in the current biennium to current fiscal year to about 3.5 million in the proposed budget. And I'm just wondering how that relates to the discussion about our insurance situation being pretty good. So it looks like.
Hey, you want to join us? You can really speak to that.
I can kind of.
And I might be able to add to it as well.
Yeah, because I believe we're pulling from the reserve that it wasn't mentioned right, so that's what I was trying to look at. Not really good.
So he's looking from. So look at the trajectory of the cost of materials and services and the services. And then the other thing I do want to mention too is that if you look at the first two columns, you've got actuals, then you have amended and proposed. When you're dealing with insurance, you tend to budget for sort of worst case scenario,
Okay.
but the actuals have to at least come under that, right? Because we have a legal level that we can't exceed. And so our actuals are going to always be considerably less than the proposed.
Okay.
Whenever it comes
That
to
makes, well, and the other chunk of that is there's about 400,000 that we have that's in what we call EAP reserve, which is our injury return to work program. And that's generated by our ability to get employees back to work. We get money from the state. So we're pulling those dollars, there's about 400,000 sitting in that, and we're pulling those dollars out to invest in employee wellness programs, primarily to do a build out for an on-site workout space for people to get exercise inside City Hall, which is the one place that we know. So 400-some thousand of that is for that purpose alone. And then the other side of that is that we do budget higher so that we have the legal authority to cover our worst case scenario. But generally speaking, what we're also anticipating through that is even though our police has done a great job of lowering that and dealing with our early deductible, but what we're facing, and this was on my PowerPoint presentation, is with all of what's going on in the climate, that is creating a significant increase in our property insurance. And so we're expecting, or we're realizing about a 20% increase in our property and liability, which has nothing to do with what we're doing,
Right.
but just has to do with what we're doing.
Thank you.
Next.
You want to stay here?
That category.
Was curious, this is probably not for you, but the line item, use of money and property, if you calculate approximately what that would relate to in interest rate, it seems pretty low, like 1.2% per annum in certain areas. And I'm wondering, and I know there's borrowings at substantially higher rates. I'm just wondering, what is your strategy for optimizing, shall we say, if not maximizing your rate of return on your use of money and property?
All right, so in terms of budgeting, the interest income for all the funds, funds are assigned, we break them out amongst all the accounts, and then they're given guidance on projecting out their interest income for those funds. And, you know, whether they follow that guidance or not, always is another question. On certain funds, again, where they're more critical funds in terms of challenges where there could be reductions, that's something where I'm gonna put my hand into a little more to make sure we're accurate. The other thing is that we have investment policy that doesn't allow us to purchase investments greater than 18 months. In a environment of rising rates, it's actually not a bad thing because it allows us to kind of circulate into higher earning securities. Right now, we're actually earning in the local government investment pool through the state of Oregon 5.25%. So you're right that we're getting much better earnings. We do have things that are still locked in from, let's say, 18 months ago, 17 months ago, 16 months ago, that might be in the ranges, of 2 to 4%. So overall, I'd have to look at the individual funds and see what they are. But our earnings probably right now are averaging 4+%.
It's pretty good. You recently shifted over to safe.
Hard to play out.
There's a table on page 92 of the big document, page 92 of 230. That I was looking for some indication in there. I guess I was looking for it under risk services to see that there might be some savings, but I'm guessing that was subsumed by your previous comment that we're just.
No, I don't have the exact dollar figure. I'd have to respond in a written way to get the exact answer to that, but we received a sizable savings, I think several $100,000 in savings by switching that to safe. Now, part of the unrealized part of that is that we still have claims that are under the CIS, which has now gone to another party. And so we still have dollars that are managing claims on our previous plan. But our experience, the way it's formulated is very different, but I think our actual workers' comp savings is sizable. I just couldn't tell you the exact number.
Sure. But would it be part of risk services?
It's part of the reason we're lowering our risk reserve dollars is that we're billed differently. So we're billed on experience versus previous formula that we had with the CIS component to it. But you won't actually see that in realized dollars at the moment because of the amount of dollars we have to maintain in the reserve fund for forget who CIS outsourced it to, but there's another entity that's managing those claims. And so over time, that will go away and our need for reserve dollars will go away. Or we'll need to maintain a very little. But that's actually it's wrapped through the internal charges, but our year after year experience, though, and what we actually spend is I want to say around $200,000 to $300,000, but I might be even underestimating that.
Thank you.
Oh, let him. Relax. No, you can, no, I'm not in a hurry. Yeah.
So up here, to answer the question about the clinic and whether our claims experience for the last 10 years, I would tell you that our union members do appreciate that significantly because they've not had a rate increase. Just getting to yesterday's question that I want to answer. But the interesting thing about the way public safety is bargaining through that collective bargaining process, you do that off of comps, and ultimately, if you don't agree, it goes to an arbitrator. But the way the state formulates that, the only thing that really matters is what the employee is charged, not what the employer is paying. So having them contribute a smaller amount to that actually is more favorable to us in our comparable as far as our total economic value. But generally speaking, our employees really love our plan and they love having access to that clinic. And because of the way our plan is set up, it allows them to save dollars through an HRA account so that when they retire, they have dollars aside that will help them. If they're using the clinic, they'll have dollars set aside to help them transition and be able to cover their healthcare costs when they retire. I'm just thinking about that question yesterday when I was sitting in the corner.
I'll ask another. All right.
Don't stop till you're done.
Okay. On page 138 of 230, it shows line item worker compensation going up pretty substantially. Actually, current fiscal year is actually low compared to the prior two, but the proposed is almost doubled current. And I'm wondering if there again, it's a matter of putting aside reserves for potential workers' comp claims. It went from 690,000 in the current fiscal year to 1.3 million. Is that like setting aside money in case you get major workers' comp claim?
Once again, I think that's connected to the EAP dollars that we're pulling out. I think it's more of what our spend is going to be, but I'd have to see if I can find that actual data. No, I hadn't asked for that at some point. But we do experience year-over-year rate increases. But it's still less than what we would have paid them for CIS, but I think most of that is the EAP dollars, and I've just got to figure out where that question is, so I'll dig.
Okay. And you said that includes the wellness center or?
No, the wellness center is funded through our benefit plan.
That's all I had for HR.
Jim, could you talk a little bit about how the wellness center is connecting with our, that's part of our contract. And so it's kind of, how it's part of our benefit plan.
Sure. So the concept behind the clinic is, and a lot of this happened, which predates me. I've been here for 7 years, so I'm Schaefer's HR director. And the way the plan design was set up is, in order to have the value of a clinic, you have to have a self-funded insurance plan. The first thing that you want to do. And so we moved to a self-funded, which has helped us considerably because the kind of fixed tax rate of that's been almost double digits for the last 5 years. But when you're self-funded, it's been more around 8%. And we've been able to absorb a lot of the additional administrative costs through smart utilization of our plan. Now, the second part of the plan is if you have a self-funded plan and then you have a high deductible plan, that helps create the incentive for employees to use the clinic because the clinic doesn't run through our insurance. And so what you're trying to do is avoid insurance claims, because the more insurance claims you have, the more likely you're going to see rate increases year after year on administrative costs. And so by having a high deductible plan, employees can access the clinic at no cost. That we have that through a direct bill through Cascade Health. And so we manage that directly and it doesn't run through our insurance plan. And then with the employees utilizing that option, they're able to save their HRA dollars for the retirement. And so We established that early on with limited hours when it was just the city of Springfield. And then we've partnered up with the school district and now they're our partner plan at our site. So they're helping with the cost and split the cost for the build out in the facility that we're utilizing. And then we've been able to expand the hours to 5 days a week, almost 8 hours a day. I think there's limits on Thursday or Friday. One of those days it's a little bit limited. And so now we're looking at, part of our kind of additional spend in our healthcare is we're looking at physical therapy as the next opportunity because we have a lot of employees who need physical therapy services that are hard to get into and they're an expense. But we also gain the valuable improve productivity because if an employee has a doctor's appointment or a physical therapy appointment, they have to leave work, they have to travel, and then they have to go through the care and then they have to travel back. And so you lose several hours by having it on site. They can sort of squeeze that in between a break period or meal period. And they're able to get back to work and not only be able to work faster and be more productive there, but on top of that, it's just the access and accessibility for the employee just makes it a lot easier.
Thank you. I wanted to go into a little bit of detail because I think it's one of the, very smart planning of kind of a win-win situation because from the employer perspective, it's advantageous to have the employees do a high deductible plan because they're contributing more to the plan, but some people may have some reticence about signing up for a high deductible. So having the option to go to our wellness clinic where they don't have to pay a deductible helps with some of the anxiety that somebody might have on signing on to a plan that is better for the overall fiscal health of the city.
While your baby waiting a month to get into a primary care provider, our clinic tries to get you within the next 24 hours on the weekday. So we're able to get people in faster. And what we've been able to do through that process is we've had a lot of significant early detections on very serious health issues. There's a few that saved people's lives because we were able to get them immediate to emergency care where they needed. But on top of that, by having people want to access that and think about preventative care, we're able to avoid some of the more costly expenses. And so when we look at our numbers compared to other vendors that we're working with in our partnership, whether it's Pacific Source or somebody else, what we find is that the utilization of the high expensive types of claims experience, which is hospitals, emergency rooms, even some of the primary care providers, we're significantly below that score, even though we have good utilization because people are more likely to go to the clinic, which is a much cheaper cost for us. And so it's unheard of, and our vendor that we work with has never seen a benefit plan go 11 years without a rate increase and have significantly healthy reserves.
Go ahead, Paul.
Before you step down, in at least two of the video presentations, it was mentioned that hiring and filling open roles continues to be a challenge. And it looks like in 24 and in 25, there's nothing in the talent acquisition budget?
Yeah.
Do you do other things?
Oh, yeah. So well, part of what we've tried to do is streamline our budget allocation. And so we were at one point set up with multiple programs and it became really rather complicated for us to figure out what we had as budgetary expenses. And so we still have talent expenses. It's a line item under our administrative costs. We don't utilize or we don't budget directly for advertising in the HR area, nor do we budget if we're going to utilize a recruiting agency. We actually have been very successful in recruiting. So we added an administrative support position and we've been able to improve our total hires, which typically traditionally averages around 40, 45 a year. And we've been able to peak that up to 65 by utilizing a lower cost position to provide support for our one talent acquisition. We're very lean, and if Michelle ever left, it would be devastating to our department as a city to try to fill positions. But we're really about average, and our ability to fill with any other government entity based on the data that we look at from NeoGov, which is kind of the industry standard for recruiting tools. And we've been able to purchase some software tools that have really helped us in gain efficiency. So NeoGov platform is one of those. And within the NeoGov platform, there's some advertising tools that make it really simple and efficient. And then we were able to connect that with our background check vendor to streamline processes. And so we've been able to build efficiencies where we need it. The challenge is really the inflation and the sequencing of our labor contracts to be competitive in the market. And I know they talked about this yesterday. But we're in the process of July. We'll be implementing our SEIU non-rep changes, which will be significant in helping us be more competitive into the market. And then, of course, our ASME and our firefighter contracts are all open for bargaining. And so hopefully we'll get all of those contracts ratified on time and get a wage scale that we think is fair. And that'll help us kind of. And then we've also been sizably impacted during the pandemic. And so we've seen that level off the last year. So hopefully that trend, we will get back to our more traditional, normal retirees levels that we have.
I'm gonna add to that, Paul. I think you're gonna see this across all the departments. You're gonna see programs where there was historical data and there isn't currently. And it's not because we're not doing those activities. It's that people were kind of encouraged to break everything into programs. And one of the questions I always ask folks is, are you using that information for anything? Because breaking down into more minute detail, complexity is expensive. And if they say, oh, I wasn't using it for anything, it's like, what's the purpose of tracking it then? And so I've encouraged folks to consolidate their accounting. You're gonna see that across every department.
Back to you, Arthur.
Well, I do have some questions for the fire chief.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
General comment, I think that if any of us have to work on a group project, we want Arthur on our team.
So I noticed that you're adding 6 FTE. Does that sound right?
Correct.
But there's a comment in there that says your service level change, well, doesn't explicitly say your service level change is 1 FTE, but under service level, it mentions the one position, I believe it's the public information officer. Would you say that your service level change also includes the 6 FTE, or is that?
So the 6 FTE, in the budget document, in the presentation talked about the ambulance system redesign. So onboarding a new workforce that's solely dedicated to EMS and leveraging the savings and doing that to adding FTE to staff the existing ambulances and reduce the overall liability for overtime.
So that would increase your service level, wouldn't it?
No, it does not add any resources to the street to respond to calls. It reduces our reliance on overtime across the system.
I read that you need to add some fleet in the coming few years. And I'm wondering how you're budgeting for that.
So we have added some significant fleet through a series of acquisitions we did with supplemental budget process, the tower ladder, a regular ladder truck, and then a fire engine. And we did it 3 different ways. One, we prepaid for the tower ladder, which was the most expensive, biggest discount. We're leasing the ladder truck, so that's an ongoing expense. And then the fire engine we pay upon delivery, which we anticipate delivery on all of those units about 4 years.
Right. So you already have the money for that, or not?
Yeah, we've got money, we've built money into our equipment replacement fund to capture both the lease payments and then making sure we have sufficient reserves. And the reason we went with that odd mix of options was to keep our equipment reserve balance healthy throughout it versus depleting it all at once.
Good. all I have. That's it. Thank you. Well, no, for fire.
For fire.
Just one.
Anybody else have questions for the chief? Oh, go ahead, Michael.
I was curious with the closure of University District and now the two ERs here in Springfield. As I was looking at the materials put together, is it possible to sort of tie that to the budget? Is it bringing more to the city of Springfield budget, or is it taking more, just kind of more at the general level, from where you said just how that impacts? And obviously, there's the logistical changes with the crews and everything, but just curious in terms of dollars, does that impact our budget?
Not significantly, because our ambulance systems in both cities are run a bit like a business, and we think about ambulance transports from Springfield. The service level in Springfield didn't change. Both of these hospitals have accepted various levels of critical patients over the years, and so the majority of all transports have been coming into Springfield for a long time. What changed was 95 patients a day that were, really lower acuity type patients who are now coming over to Springfield, not by large volumes in the ambulance. We were transporting maybe 14 people a day there. Again, the one way that would come into the budget would be ambulance transport revenue. That doesn't necessarily impact Springfield, except for longer wait response time. Springfield ambulances responded to Eugene, pick up patients, and the city does receive revenue from that work. We are, though, working on with state legislature with an innovation fund. One added some ambulance capacity in Eugene to help support the downtown core and people's access to care. But we'll also leverage other opportunities for alternative transport destinations. There's a list of things, the RFPs out right now for same day access to care, avoiding use of the 911 system, avoiding use of the emergency room. So we're excited to see what gets generated out of that, but a specific revenue. Maybe keep it McKinsey will have it more solvent with patients.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead and jump back into what I remember before what I said. First off, we have the best chief. We have the best fire department. We have Eugene and Springfield, two cities. Used to be seven. Let's bring them together. What I'm concerned about is as we go through these budgets, money that we assessing the taxpayer. Between the two cities. Is it gonna get out of balance? Eugene's gonna spend a whole bunch of money in the fire department. We're gonna have to make it in Springfield to be active. And those are the numbers I'm concerned about. We're voted by the people of Springfield to represent you, to do the best we can, and spend their money wisely. I want to make sure we're doing it. So that's why.
Did you understand that?
I did, and yeah, and just for clarity for the rest of the budget committee and the concerns. We're in the kind of nearing the turn on our governance review process, which is talked about in the budget. Hopefully we'll be before our governance review panel on June 20th and I believe Springfield Council on July 8th. Presenting the findings of the feasibility of the options for us.
It better be July 1st.
July 1st. No, it's all right. Yeah. We got to present it twice. I can remember if Eugene was the first or Springfield was the first, but there you go. Anyway, not to put any extra work or dates on people's calendars, but it will serve to provide some numbers to help arm the decision-making body with what's the best for the community and how might you levy those fees and things. So.
Can you comment a little bit about some of the investments that Springfield has made historically over the years that come into play in this analysis? We had a brief discussion about that once, but we did put a couple stations and we have tried to hire staff.
Oh, yeah, no, I think I get where you're going with that. And it's a good opportunity is, I understand, we have two cities. We're one fire department. The community very much sees us as one fire department. This August will be 10 years since the last major move. We brought our operational staff to work across the city boundaries. But both cities are unique, unique funding challenges, things that they're gonna be working through. And you're gonna start to see some things as we talk about a proposed fire fee in the city of Eugene. And a lot of public education that goes with that, very specific to fire staffing funding, how things have gone over the years in Eugene. And I think where the manager's getting at is understands we talk about fire services both by daily staffing levels and the number of units in Eugene hasn't really changed over the last 40 years. We ran the same analysis in Springfield to make sure that we could communicate with our community and with our fire staff of, why aren't we having the same conversation at this table right now with the same kind of level of information? And that is in that same time frame. Springfield has grown about the same. The call volume's up 1,000%, very similar. But 2 of the 5 fire stations in Springfield were added. And so there's Springfield has done a good job trying to keep up with the community's growth and investing in those resources. And so again, it's the challenge in trying to communicate in this environment is there's going to be a lot of campaign. It doesn't say directly Eugene Springfield Fire. It talks a lot about the city of Eugene and the growth of the city and the needs, the particular needs there. But it's going to be something that could, pique your interest and see. There's a website, Eugene Fire Facts, that will have the stories as they kind of ramp up to talk about that. It's an important issue. Again, we're very different. The tools that we'll leverage even in the future. The cities, there's no real stark way for the cities not to retain some control over the service level that exists and how you fund that.
What would be the worst case scenario?
And
Things really went less than optimal. What would we as citizens experience potentially?
for governance or funding, or for just our service in general?
Funding being a key driver.
Yeah, obviously funding is a key driver for everybody across the state of Oregon. Unfortunately, I was at a work session in Eugene last night and didn't get to see Nate's presentation or the managers, but I'm certain it talked about tax measures and the limitations that exist there. The demand for service, the risk from fire continues to grow and outpace available revenues and the emerging wildfire threats where we're focusing a lot. That's where, that's a space where, an ounce of prevention is really obvious in education. They say that, for every dollar you spend on prevention, you save $33 in loss in the fire world. So there's a lot of that, but ours is always going to be about making sure that we're resourced correctly and our staff spending a tremendous amount of time evaluating how we're sending resources to us and making sure that we send the right resources, but we retain the appropriate level of response capability for these larger incidences.
Do you participate in any prescribed burns? Is that part of what you guys do?
It's a great question. So we do participate with local agencies of Nature Conservancy. There's a tremendous amount of parks land in West Eugene, the Flatter, the Prairie Restoration Projects. We work with that a lot. One of the things with our new wildfire program we're looking at is getting staff certified to be what are called burn bosses, the people who coordinate, do all the paperwork to get it set up. Fire is going to grow as a tool used to mitigate wildfire. We learned when Councilor Pictionary and us were back in Washington, D.C., that was Department of Interior. So a lot of conversation about setting up regional burn hubs. And that is all the resources needed to put more fire on the ground. And so we're evaluating though, and hopefully, Jamin, the risk managers aren't listening, but what does it look like to engage with our private property owners? And burn is a tool for wildfire mitigation. So.
And would that be an additional source of revenue potentially?
Usually they're training opportunities and it's a win-win, right, for the property owner. most of the burning you see goes on, happens on public land managed by the BLM. In our area, they're the more prolific burners. By the time our forests are ripe for, dry burns in the Willamette Valley, conditions are rarely right the way they are in the Central Cascades and Eastern Cascades where you see a lot of bushcrack fire this time of year.
Chief, thank you. You're doing great work, by the way.
Thank you.
Question in regards, that's not a setup, but I guess that is, a lot of people do that technique to compliment them. What I'm thinking of is that in Springfield, which is unique to any other part of a incorporated city, where we permit backyard burning at a half acre or greater size lots. And it was proposed and accepted and moved through that we actually allow some early burning in Springfield before the burn season, even with Greenwoods, with the head nod of a RAPA board. And that moved through and it worked fairly well, although there was very few occasions where people were actually doing backyard burning is because of the lot size limitation. So I'm thinking because of trying to minimize or mitigate potential fires that because of this last winter storm or ice storm, that there's a huge amount of debris that's down on the floor. In some areas 3 and 4 feet thick. So is there consideration or would there be steps in which that size limitation can be reduced to quarter acre, which would allow hundreds of more opportunities and still follow the same rules of El Rapa with allowed burn days and no burn days? Do you see that as a possibility to do, or is that something that is just governmentally huge? I mean, is it more difficult for the government? Is the payoff, the difficulty of having that happen greater than the logic of having it happen?
I think depending on how all the stakeholders come to the table, right? The two biggest stakeholders are the city and El Rapa. You know, there's obviously some fire code implications to it. And that's really proximity to property boundaries. And it's easier to apply a blanket, you can't burn on less than this because of the likelihood of worrying about that issue. Is it there? It's something that it's, I think, worth furthering the conversation. Maybe we can bring some options to agenda review it, and maybe you all could consider a work session or how you might want to proceed receiving that, thinking through it. We'd be happy to help with that conversation.
So I'm gonna burn the weeds that we're getting down to a little bit, to use the fire analogy, and just suggest that maybe this would be more of a policy discussion with the council, and it'd be hard to quantify a budgetary element right now, but it's, I think that it was something that people found beneficial, certainly after the ice storm, and I appreciate Councilor Pictionary's connection with El Rapa, because you really moved that forward very swiftly. And I think we have a much better relationship with them now. Even now, I've learned more about their organization because of the work you've done on their board. So I think it's a full council discussion.
Yep, and I just brought that up because that was part of the justification of getting a PIO for the fire department to work towards a fire mitigation program. And so that's why I was dropping that seed as far as looking at that position. So
Yeah, and that position's work tying in with the fuels manager will be helping educate the community. One of the best models so far that we found is out of Boulder, Colorado, where it's really public education and engagement. Not a lot of, it's not government coming in and say, we're going to take care of this for you, but we're going to remove the barriers to help you be able to do that. That's the biggest opportunity we'll have here with that.
thank you.
And I think in the case of the PIO position, yes, controlled burns are part of fire service, but even more outreach, I would say, would be to our communities about defensible space near people's homes that they may not even be aware. and how they can do some really low hanging fruits to help protect their own home, for fire.
Any other questions? Oh, okay, come on.
So I don't believe that, this would be really quick, so, I knew I had an email somewhere with the details to it. So the actual, premium that we're budgeting for SAFE for the year is 780,000, which is slightly up, but that's just to help us with our legal authority. But we also had to budget additional 6,000 for an actuary study that we need to do, so every 2 years or 3 years, to that effect. And then we had 135,000 that we have for claims expense, which is really tied to our previous vendor. And then the remaining 400,000 is EAP reserves that we're pulling for the build out for the gym and other activities. But the claims is just 780 is what we're budgeting.
Oh, question.
No, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, any other questions from the budget?
I have a question about the treatment court, wondering how that's, what impact has that had on the budget? If any?
At this point, very little impact. So this was an initiative by the presiding judge to bring a treatment court to our municipal court. And he was able to secure a grant of $900,000 for 4 years. In future years, I think there's going to be a delta between the cost and the budget for that program. However, we have the opioid settlement that has very specific things that we have to spend that money on, and this falls squarely within those requirements. So we've got the opioid settlement money that can help bridge the gap on the treatment court in future years. So it is our intention and our expectation that this won't draw on any general fund dollars.
And what is your estimate of the impact on the budget for the CFEC lawsuit situation?
I'm gonna bring up Rivers.
You mean the impact for if what the legal costs have been to do, like or what it would be if once it's in
My
place?
understanding was the appeal was turned down, or it didn't go through.
The appeal at the Court of Appeals, the state prevailed on most of the claim. We have the jurisdictions who've all banded together are taking you to the state Supreme Court.
Oh, okay,
And
so
now
it's not done yet.
Yeah, so we're in a little bit
Okay.
of a holding pattern.
Okay. Very good. And there will be a cost presumably to bring it to the state Supreme Court.
Yeah, less of a cost though at the Court of Appeals level. Because that's where most of the record is made the appellate record.
Right.
And so there will be some costs, but there is less at this level. So really just kind of a holding pattern now.
Thank you.
Before you go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Is there any other?
And then legal.
Any other? So we're open to any other budget questions. Go ahead.
For police, I have a couple or a few questions on changes in budget. Say, table that says the special revenue fund increased quite a bit in the current fiscal year. That's on page 161 of the big document.
Actually, Mike can explain.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so, forever funds, it was never clear on how those, could be spent in terms of what the definition of obligated is. So early on, one of the things we were told by auditors, and every municipality was hearing this across the state, that if you budget for it, it's obligated. So you have to have the money spent by December 31st, 2024, or obligated by December 31st, 2024, and you had till 26 to spend it. So we had 10 positions that we were paying for with ARPA funds, and they were budgeted for July 1st to June 30th. That was fiscal year 25, the budget year we're in right now. However, a few months back, the treasury came out and said, no, Budgeted is not obligated. Staffing has to be spent by December 31st. So all of a sudden we lost half the funding for those ARPA positions, and we had $900,000 of ARPA funds now unallocated. So one of the things that we learned, and I want to say this, in a lot of municipalities, they just they did revenue replacement, which is what we did, and then they just put it towards staffing. Existing positions, they just put to staffing. One of the things we wanted to do was spend it on projects that we've been wanting to do for years, but never had the funds to do, and we did some great projects. However, with the general fund challenges that we had, we really wanted to use the remaining dollars to prop up the general fund. And so what we decided to do is we'll just take 10 other positions and budget them half a year into 204 for to use up those ARPA funds. And the police officers were just a really easy uniform group. I don't know if you were aware of this, Chief. So that is just their general fund positions that we're just covering for half a year with our funds, so we can fully expend our funds and shore up our general fund. Otherwise, we would have had a greater deficit than we already promised.
And those also figure into the FY25 figure for July through December, those ARPA funds.
Yes.
Okay.
So what we did is we took 20 positions from July 1st to December 31st instead of 10 positions from July 1st to June 30th.
Right.
And then all 20 of those positions come back into the general fund on January 1st for the final 6 months of the year. Same thing. We just, 6 of one, half a dozen. of the other.
Yeah. Okay. And the other question I had on this, and this is probably also for you, Nathan, on the police local option levy fund, the dollar value changes, it goes up, but it changes from year to year. And I was assuming that it looks like it changes substantially more than what I would expect the property value or, any capitated rate amount to be. So I'm just wondering, how does that work?
Can you give me a page?
It's page 161. It's the same page. It's right below the special revenue fund. It's the police local option levy fund.
Well, again, we're dealing with budget versus actuals. So with that levy rate, you're right, we set that levy rate, and that's the set rate for that entire 5 years of that levy.
Right.
It's very specific to the type of things that we can spend it on, and it covers 100% of our jail. So with that fund, and it's not always a consistent from year to year as you'd expect it to be, and I'll get to that in a second. But you always start with the remaining balance for the previous 5-year cycle. And then we apply that and take that into consideration when we set our new levy rate. And then we set that new levy rate, and then the funds come in, and sometimes property tax receipts do come in higher than anticipated. With that, it can fluctuate in terms of what we charge there, but where I'm going with this is we had our jail medical double. And so what we decided to do was we're gonna try to absorb it into the levy. But when we get into those outer levy years, we have a fixed levy amount that is available to us.
Right.
We may have to make up the difference with the general fund to complete that levy. And that could explain why it could be a little top heavy in the early years because of that doubling in our jail medical. That being said, we lease out jail beds, and we are changing those rates to reflect that increase in medical, and we're hopefully gonna recover as much of that as we can from our partner agencies that lease beds for us. But, also recognizing we built the jail for Springfield, not to go into the business of having a jail. So there's kind of only so many beds that you can use on.
And I think I wrote down that you mentioned earlier that the population and the food costs were up substantially in the jail. Does that sound right?
Yeah, correct. Food costs have gone up, but not one percentage, but it's significant.
And the population as well?
Yes.
What caused I don't know, I assume it was a fairly sizable increase in population, but
Well, largely coming out of COVID, we've started, we had to relax the restrictions that we had, so we can actually get people in the jail that we had pre-COVID, and so that's responsible part of those numbers.
it's easy to forget about COVID.
Levy questions. So I have a question, because my understanding is that this jail was approved and we did this 20+ years ago. This was not supposed to stay on a levy and keep being funded by the people. And I'm wondering, is there any conversation about stopping this, because I think it's really horrible that we have people who work for that jail, that every 5 years they have to wonder whether they're gonna have a job or not. And so it's just a point of contention for me. I love the fact that the city has a jail. I think it's a great asset, you know, but I'm just frustrated with the fact that it's continually on the backs of the people in the community. And I also think we ought to look at feeding prisoners the way they do in Cottage Grove, which I think they do powdered milk and frozen dinners, but that would save a lot of money. So anyway, I'm just wondering about the jail. What, are we gonna just continue to bank on a levy?
That's a good, that one. He's doing.
And you so I agree with you. 20 years I've been here, there was talk about trying to slowly get away from these levies, and we were gonna start with the fire levy. And we started to transfer positions over to the general fund. And then we hit the recession and things just got away from us, and we haven't been able to move any fund over to the general fund. So looking at our budget situation, especially the forecast that I showed you, under our current funding model, it will never happen. I hope I'm not getting in front of council by saying that. However, I've got some ideas if you want to explore them. One could be if we did a payroll tax. We've already run the numbers. If we made it the same as the city of Eugene, that would generate enough to retire the police levy, and it might create about $500,000 to $800,000 surplus to help us plug that structural balance in the general fund. So the only way we're going to be able to do it is to look at new revenues. And there's other ones we can look at as well. But under the current structure of funding, it's never going to happen.
And I agree with you 100%.
In Swanson Mills, they're like $150.
I would invite you anytime to come over and see the meals that we share with folks, their box lunches that we have made that we ship in. They provide all the nutrition that they need.
Everybody toward the jail, and I can tell you there is no froze.
Yeah.
And
I was being
it,
sarcastic.
it makes a lot of sense to contract with the agency that already produces a mass number of these meals, and there are legal requirements that you have to meet for inmates, especially for religious accommodation for meals.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just one, I think. I believe I read that you are awaiting word on accreditation to come in late April. And I'm wondering if you've heard.
Accreditation word did come in late April. We did achieve accreditation. We presented that award 3 or 4 weeks ago, so we're super proud of. And I think we have a date in front of council at a work session in about 2 3 weeks, where the executive director of the Accreditation Association is going to do a quick presentation and talk about what that means and officially present it to us as a council here coming up. So it's something we're very proud of.
So not to steal any thunder, would that have any impact on the budget?
Not directly necessarily, but I think it's just another measure of a professional organization and how we do things. And hopefully that's just one piece of the puzzle on how to reduce a lot of our overall expenses with, insurance and risk and that kind of thing. So
If I can comment on I'm sure, probably Councilor Fisher might be on the same track on this, but I'm extremely proud of our police department, and this is a significant accomplishment for them. So a lot of hard work went into achieving accreditation status. What this does that is interesting to me is it sets in process. First of all, they had to review all of their policies and procedures, make sure that they have the correct ones in place to achieve accreditation. That is a mechanism by which we go back and make sure that they're kept up to date. So it's a great way to help to make sure that the good work that Chief Shear has started will continue throughout the years through the accreditation process. It's just kind of a cyclical thing. You're like, okay, it's time to review, and we got to make sure that we're still in good standing. And I think it's also for a law enforcement agency, it is important to demonstrate trust to our community that not only are our policies and procedures updated, but they're reviewed by an independent third party with expertise in the field that do this nationally. So to me, it's always good when you have another agency looking at you. So you're not only just looking internally, right?
I think we're on a 3-year reaccreditation cycle. So they come back every 3 years. It's as rigorous, if not more so than this initial accreditation. So we got to stay on top of things during a 3-year window, and then they come back and we go through everything again.
Try to be brief. I know I'm in the weeds, but
historically speaking, when we put the jail together, when it was conceived at council, the idea of how it got passed at the time was that it was going to be paid for in full through rent. Right.
Exactly.
That's how it was sold and that's how it was bought. And then reality hit and realized, okay, we can't do it this way, but we've created a jail. So now we have to be able to fund it. And so it's kind of the cart before the horse, and what my experience is, and I was directly involved in that. So it's one of those deals where it's like, okay, I'd be the first person to jump in line to say we need to find some permanent funding. And it's been a moving target, very rapidly moving target ever since. So I agree, we need to find some stable funding for our entire public safety system, fire and police. So I totally am on board with that and ready to put energy towards it. On different ones, what's the ADP on the jail?
Average population?
Yep.
Well, it's a 98 bed facility and we're running anywhere from the mid 40s to the mid 50s typically on any given day.
Right, which from to my knowledge has been very consistent because it's working. It means that their people aren't shirking aren't shirking the laws and getting picked up and filling our jails is because they kind of don't want to be here. And so the jail, and looking at the food, same thing through Corrective Industries. That's the food that's put together by inmates and is sold at a very low cost. And I tell you, nutritionally and value-wise for money, you can't beat it. That's just all there is to it. I've seen it over decades. So my hat's off to how the jail's being run in the city. We just need to find some stable funding. Done, sorry.
I know you have a lot of expertise in this area, so you could probably take on the rest of the night talking about what you can do.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So it seems like it's not my second year here in the budget committee, and it seems like I heard the same thing last year about deferred maintenance. It's kind of this warning, but I haven't really ever heard of any like, what are we gonna do? So it's kind of like we're in a car and we know we gotta get an oil change, but we're gonna go spend the money for gas and not get that oil change. Like, do we have a plan? We have like, no, we know we can go this long without really doing that deferred maintenance. We have a plan for what solutions we could use to have more money. It's just going to be like the roads where eventually we're just gonna have an emergency bond in front of the voters to pay for something when it breaks at the jail. I don't know. Just curious. I haven't.
Well, I think Brian's probably sitting back there, but I know that we are in discussions of doing a facilities assessment of not just the jail, but all city facilities. To try to address exactly what you're talking about, like what is the scope and scale of the type of repairs needed? How we also have, the city owns some properties, the Springfield Economic Development Agency or CEDA also owns some properties. So we have to have a larger discussion for some of those properties. There's been talk in prior years of, say, for instance, the Booth Kelly site. Do we want to keep that site? That could potentially be a very attractive site to redevelop, but we have tenants in it. And so we typically do yearly leases with those tenants. So we are, a couple of things we're doing, work internally with our operations group, but also going in front of the council next week, we're going to be having a contract with a Campbell Property Management to help us look at our portfolio of facilities and help us make determinations about the level of repair that we need. Should we potentially sell some of these? Do we want to continue to rent to some, we just went through a kind of a painful experience with that. What is the appropriate level of rent? So it's a much larger discussion. The jail is one of our newer facilities. Or at the Justice Center, I should say. We've recently had to make some repairs on the roof there, and we used ARPA funding for that. So that's kind of some of the uses that Nathan alluded to. I was looking at, okay, ARPA, one-time money, one-time use. This would be a great time to address some of these facilities. So I was thinking about, hey, maybe we could replace the HVAC system. As you all witnessed yesterday, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge. And then we recognized that the price tag on that was just absolutely exorbitant. So, you know, we do need a more comprehensive and strategic approach to what to do about facilities. I think that this is, you know, it's a pretty common experience, unfortunately, in Oregon with government, when you don't have a lot to work with, you kind of go with the precedent, and it's unfortunate because you tend to value engineer things out of your buildings that could have saved you money had you kept them in. So it's definitely a difficult situation. So if, you know, if we could get a little relief on our general fund through other ways, I think that we could start putting more money aside for those types of repairs. But I'm trying to give an example. So again, I don't want to get in front of the council, but we currently give general fund to the street fund. That's not something that you commonly do. You can do it. In my background in counties, we would never do that. Use property funds for street funds. There's other funding sources that you would use. Cities have a little bit more flexibility in that regard, but if we were to able to find a different funding mechanism that we could use directed towards streets, then we wouldn't have to put that general fund allotment into our street fund. So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at it. I'm going to need every brain on our council to help me with this, and my great department of business.
Anyone else?
Just one more.
Oh, one more. Chief?
On your performance measures, just for my own edification, your clearance rates, person and property crimes, is what time period is that from the time the crime is committed till you determine whether it's cleared or not?
It's within that year.
When-
I can't break it down anymore from that, but within a week or 6 months, but within that year, that's the clearance rate for those.
Right.
reports.
So at the end of a year, 26% or 76% or whatever have been cleared. Right. Perfect. Thank you.
Are we done with here?
Thanks.
The questions that I had for you, you're gonna ask those
Yes,
questions, and you're gonna do that tomorrow, or are we doing that on another time?
probably at a later date. It'll take us a little bit of time to dig into it, see what's going on exactly. So we'll have to work with HR because that's coming through our PeopleSoft HCM module, which is HR. And tomorrow we'll be preparing for tomorrow's budget.
I have a question about how we could make money. And I've been hearing a lot of need for housing and economic development, encouraging businesses to come in. And the minute we can generate more sources of revenue, the better. Springfield has had a reputation of being a great place to come and settle and also live and grow a business. Is there anything about that whole formula that we could improve on, or is what's holding up anybody coming and settling into Springfield that we could
I
help
want to write a
to?
best-selling book that I just, you know, cruise off into retirement. You know, I think there's so many factors to go into why housing gets constructive, and probably more recently, interest rates and the cost of labor and materials to construct a large development. We have a very large development that we're just nearing completion with Marcola Meadows. It's had really excellent sales they finished up their single family units, I believe, and then the council just recently went out and went through a ribbon cutting for the apartment units. So I anticipate that those will be snapped up pretty well. So part of it is how much land you have that you can develop and getting the infrastructure in place, and then the developer base that you have to work with that, you know, we're always reaching out to developers. We have people, when we talk about Glenwood, we've done tours with developers on the site so they can go down and experience what it looks like and can envision investing there. So I think we do a lot of work in that regard. But a lot of it is purely driven by the market of housing, cost of materials, cost of labor. And so I think that's been a large driver. I think our city has an excellent reputation. We're also in this kind of growth period. We're not a small city, but there are people that have lived in our city for a long time and just kind of like it the way it is, you know, and I know from experience in living in an urban environment, you know, when you live in a city and as a city grows, you get used to that, you know, that growth and more people being around you, more cars being on the street. But there are a lot of people that have had kind of the best of both worlds. We've made some great investments downtown. We drive right up and go and, you know, do your business. But as more people move here and we get denser, there will be, you know, a little bit of squawking about that. So there are always things that, you know, this council has to balance when they make decisions around that. That said, we've done a lot of work around annexations, a lot of work trying to get land buildable and ready. Glenwood is a great example where CETA made a lot of investments to actually purchase land, get that compiled to such an amount where you can actually do some large project and put some housing there. So I think we're really poised well for that. It's just, it takes time. It takes time.
And hopefully people understand that we need to have good infrastructure and roads to get to those developments. And so check your ballots.
I cannot say that, but thank you, Councilor Doyle. She's a great ambassador for that.
Well, and my response to you, Nathan, that you mentioned about the increase in the payroll tax. And I'm wondering if that isn't a way we can put some money here, because I see a lot of people who work here but live across the way or surrounding areas, and so their property taxes aren't doing anything for the city's budget. And Salem experienced that with the big people come down from the surrounding areas, work there, but they're not doing anything to help the infrastructure of the town and so on. So I think, yeah, I'd love to see a presentation of how that might put some dollars in for current needs, and then we can help build some options for building infrastructure and business
I would
dynamics.
say speak to your council.
I get to speak to the council.
I'm just saying, that's.
Every Monday.
Everybody.
Yep.
Any other questions, Joe?
And this is backtracking, but budget wise, and I forgot to ask this earlier. And I scripted this just so to make it easier and hopefully you'll understand, because I usually talk crypted. Do we have any loans that cost less than 5.5% that we're paying on? Are we trying to pay those down quicker than the minimum due payments? Versus, do we have any loans that are outstanding that are costing us more than 5.5%? And are we trying to pay those down quicker than scheduled?
Greater no, less than yes and no. We're paying them at the rate that they, the pace that they were set at. In fact, when
Low interest ones.
the low interest ones, and in fact, when we just did a borrowing in, I believe it was the Glenwood district, we already had 2 outstanding borrowings. And we considered the possibility, depending on what rates we received, of borrowing more and consolidating into a single borrowing. But the rate that we got on that third borrowing was so much higher that we're gonna leave the other 2 alone because they were down in the 2% range.
So I guess the question is that's just standard operating procedure, standard policy of our fiscal department, correct?
I don't know if it's an operating procedure written down,
Practice.
but I would say it's a common sense practice of our city.
Thank you. That's all I was asking. Thanks.
That's a good question. I think Nathan does a really good job monitoring that, and we talk about it a lot, like, do we have anything that's gonna be coming off, you know? Cause that's just all to the
I
good.
almost felt bad asking it.
Just for future reference, another when we audit our financial records, the annual comprehensive financial report talks about the overall deposition of the city. And, it's one of those, reports that people often don't look at. They tend to look, because it is admittedly dry. I mean, Arthur's laughing because it's a kind of an insomnia read, but when I'm looking at different public agencies, it's one of the first documents I go to look at to get a good indication of the overall health of the organization.
Wow. Any other questions or topics, Michael?
Yeah, in the Development and Public Works, presentation, there was talk of the record applications that I think had happened in the first part of the year. And I was curious is there a correlation, and I think you mentioned it's cyclical, the nature of those, if I understood that correctly. Is there a correlation where those applications turn into revenue in other areas later on within a year, 2 years, just kind of generally, can you track that when applications go up, revenues find their ways into certain parts of the city? I don't know if that's.
Jeff can come up if you want to. I mean,
Because there's revenues that come in for the development side of it, and then eventually it's completed and goes on to the tax rates.
Shows up on the tax bill.
So let me give you a real world example, because we were talking about the 5-year general fund forecast, and Nathan and I, and the budget team kind of made the determination like that we wanted to try to capture as much real-time data as we could, so that it's not a swag kind of forecast. And so I asked Nathan when we were initially developing this, are we accounting for the development that will be coming in with Marcola Meadows, right? Because that was a big one that we knew was hitting. And so we did do estimations based on that development and projections. And so that's built into our forecast. So those are the types of things that we look at that, because it's one thing to go and to the permit counter, pull a permit, but it's quite another thing when you're actually out there turning the dirt and seeing the units being built and either purchased or rented out.
Yeah, when it starts out as construction planning fees, I'm assuming, and then it's gonna go into SDCs before it goes into.
Yeah, and I think it's that. He's up here. Yeah. Haskell, Community Development Director. I think the correlation is a little difficult to get too far. I think in the 5-year forecast, it's one thing because we even though we're experiencing really high applications, it's not necessarily some of those projects may not happen within the next 24 months. I think once they pull building permits, then it really becomes real. And even at that stage, we've seen them come in and pull back and take and cancel their building permits. We have some apartment buildings right now that have building permits that they haven't broken ground on yet. And we don't, they have 18 months, I think, before their building permit expires and then they can come in and renew it. But so I think in that early application, it's a good thing to track, to just know that there's a lot of activity out there and that potential. But I think translating it to any sort of future revenue is really difficult until you actually, as Nancy said, see them turning earth and we see the infrastructure starting to be put back in. And then we also have growth rates built into our rate models for user rates and that sort of thing as new units come on. So we see more water use, that means more wastewater, stormwater hitting the system and those users paying.
So while we're talking about growth and how it impacts finances, I think it would be might help people. And, I don't know if you guys will know this right away, is how much tax revenue do we really get from a development of Meadows? When it's fully built out, like what do they actually pay the city?
I think we're gonna have to take some time.
Yeah, that's a.
And the reason I'm asking, right, and we can come back, and you can cut it and shape it any way you want, but I think we've seen so much growth in the city, right? It's easy to look at the physical growth and assume that that's really driving a lot of revenue into the city, and I'm guessing that's probably not as strong as what folks think.
Yeah, I would say especially on our infrastructure revenue, I mean, there was a lot of infrastructure put in, and then when we think about the number of streets, I'm not certain that when what we're seeing in gas tax revenue, that we're seeing the revenue come in on that side of to support the street system that's in there.
That's
And
pretty
all the
easy to
infrastructure.
quantify.
But speaking to, we have our existing residential housing stock, and we've got that 3% collar, and we've got a real market value that exceeds most assessed values. So that's kind of a strong 3% growth that's already sort of set. When we've seen some of our best growth in our property tax revenues, it's happened in years, for instance, when we had the enterprise zone exemptions that expired. These were tax breaks that were given, they're guaranteed 3 years. They can get up to 5 years if they meet certain requirements. If they put in significant investments, we had both IP and Swanson's do that. When they came back on the rules, we saw big jumps in our assessed value when that happened. So it's looking at residential development. I think you're looking at a couple tenths of a % of increases in terms of our property tax growth from year to year.
So I think just to the broader question, right, like we've all been kind of dancing around, is that when we think about people moving to the community, right, we've got to have good neighborhoods, good houses, so that people want to compete. We've got to sort of shape that and balance that with the industrial base, right, that really drives, a good mix of revenue for the city.
And one final thought, because nothing is an easy, straightforward answer, but another factor to consider is, Sherry, you talked about how do we incentivize growth? How do we get people to build here? And, the council recently passed a tax exemption for development and to increase density in the city. So although that's great, it gets people in, that's 10 years where they were not going to be receiving property taxes. So there's not necessarily like, okay, they pulled a permit and now we're gonna see this, it really depends on what the development is, if they received any exemptions, there's a lot of factors that go into play. Good discussion. Go ahead, Arthur. Keep it going.
I have a question that probably would be addressed to operations. And it has to do with the TV inspection of wastewater collection system. And in the performance measures, it indicated that in the current fiscal year, only 7 miles, I think, were done instead of 22 as originally planned. And I'm wondering what happened there.
And then there's a target, I think, in the coming year of doubling that. So I'm guessing that we had equipment and also staffing challenges, but I'm gonna refer to Adam, who is our wastewater collection system manager and subsurface stormwater as well.
And Brian, will you just?
Oh, yeah, Brian Common Operations Division Director.
Thank you. While you're sitting there, on page 109, it says that you're planning on doing for the coming fiscal year, you're planning on doing 14 miles of crack seal, I believe. And then in the performance measures, it says 0 miles for the upcoming, which I presume is just a typo.
No, it's not. It actually, Ben and I had a discussion about this today. So we're foregoing doing a slurry seal project, and the reason that we are, there's a couple of them, is we will be doing crack sealing in residential streets and also on arterial collector streets. That's the 14 miles. But the storm it hit us hard, and we had a lot of street fund expenditures, as did the county. And the county is not doing a slurry seal project this year, and we have Ben had 3 years ago worked with the county as our contract provider for slurry seal. So both the county and Springfield will not have. We were going to have a small project this year, and with the expenditures that we've had, we're needing to forego that.
So you are doing.
So we will crack seal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which is a preventive maintenance treatment.
Right.
Super important to do. We don't do enough of it, and it gets to Mr. Miller's deferred maintenance issues that we have, and it's mostly fiscal constraints.
So the performance measure is listed as crack seal and slurry seal, and that means both not just one or the other.
In that particular measure, it's confusing.
Yeah,
Yes, we can
okay.
split those out because they're two separate things,
Right.
but you do one.
Yep.
In preparation for slurry seal.
Right.
You burn and seal the cracks, and then we seal comprehensively over the asphalt surface. Yeah.
What made you choose that instead of like getting rid of some of the engineering costs? Because that's kind of where I was gonna go, and I can wait until after we take a break, but there's a lot of stuff in the budget that has to do with, almost sounds like internal office stuff. It has to do with engineering, it has to do with design, it has to do with stuff that's more on the book as opposed to physically going out there and doing that work. And I find I'm just wondering why the choice was to get rid of something that you know we need, that the voters are looking at us, asking them for a bond to fix roads, and then they see that the thing we cut is the thing that helps with roads. So can you see why that would be a question for
Yeah, no,
people?
I can, and I think it's the paradigm we're in with the street fund. And dating back to 2003, we implemented a local fuel tax of 3 pennies. At the same time, within a year or two, we lost timber receipts from the county. And so we've been reliant on state gas tax and revenue sharing from the state. And so what we've done is we look at our priorities, and we call it priority-based budgeting, although it's not technically what we call it, but we balance. If you think about modernization, for example, of a transportation traffic light system, how critical they are to the transportation system, just as important as the surface. You don't want people colliding in intersections when your hardware and software are breaking down because they're antiquated. And so it's this balance that Jeff and I actually are the directors over pretty much the street funded activities. And who would have guessed that we would have spent the amount of money we did on street trees where we had 20,000 compromises in this current fiscal year. And so that's how we approach our budgeting. A lot of times people look to where, and I get this, if I were to look and I see management and administration costs, right?
Millions.
We have a lot of projects going on that require that.
Why can't those projects wait? Why can't the projects wait and fix the stuff that has to do with maintenance? It has to do with the people of the city that need that stuff too. I don't understand why it has to be the maintenance, it's the stuff that gets deferred.
I think if
We know in the long run what it's gonna cost us.
I get your point. I think if people were able to really dive into how little we spend, how little money we have to spend, and I think Nathan described it well, and he's done this the last 3 cycles where he's described measure 5 and measure 50 and the implications of property tax. When I came here, and it was a long time ago, we used general fund money, not to subsidize, but to do a lot of street fund maintenance. And in the city, you were used street or general fund money, less and less. But that's our biggest challenge, is balancing our priorities. We have regulatory requirements that we need to ensure that we have safe transportation systems. We're doing our best to do that, and it takes smart people, looking at what our priorities are to figure those things out. And I think we do a good job without being able to look in, to the entire breakdown of what we're spending money on. Nathan has done, I think, a really superb job of finding out where we're subsidizing, where we shouldn't be subsidizing. Where do we use the street fund, for example, where we shouldn't be using street fund dollars to subsidize? And so I think we're refining that as, ongoing.
Jeff, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about projects, most of the projects we're working on the transportation network, aside from 42nd Street right now, which we just opened bids on, are federal aid projects. And one of the things that ODOT put into the federal aid is requirements to spend that money within a timely fashion. And we're up against the clock on some of those, otherwise they can claw that money back, and the MPO can take that money back and redistribute it to other projects that are ready to go. And so a lot of those projects are already in motion. We have agreements signed with not, because we're not federally certified yet. We're very close. We're doing our first certified project now, our 10th project, but that's one reason we can't just pull back on a lot of the projects that are already in swing and move that funding elsewhere. And again, I think it's when Brian and I had the conversation shortly after things started opening back up after the ice storm. I think it was that simple fact of where do we find money to cover until we know what's going to happen with FEMA and the potential to get the money back. I would say that eventually when we're able to get money back, it goes back into that fund, we'll be able to get out and do that slurry seal. I think we're going to be doing the really important work, which is the crack milling this summer, which I think is the critical piece, which was that first piece. But I think that's just where we're at with projects and assessment. We don't have a lot of projects that are solely city funded with city local dollars, I should say, in the transportation. Most everything that we are doing, Mill Street, a lot of the sidewalk projects, the crossing projects, they're all federal aid projects.
Mention Mohawk too.
Yeah, Mohawk, we're working on Mohawk right now and we're figuring out how to fund that piece with some funds that we do have in there. The other thing is when we look at funding, we have funding in the street fund right now, but it was HB 2017 money and it's dedicated to 42nd Street. So sometimes you might look at the street fund and go, well, the street fund doesn't look, the reserve looks pretty good, but remember that money is earmarked. And when we work with the city attorney's office and looking at what we can do, it's earmarked for 42nd Street. And so we can't use that for a lot. We're using a little bit of it right now to kind of do a short-term project to get us through until we know what we're doing with the levy.
Where does potholes getting filled fall into? What category does that fall into? Where do you categorize filling potholes?
It would be 1050 is open spaces. Yeah.
Okay.
Between Mill Street, right?
So just one really quickly on the main budget document on page 108 of 230. It talks about some of the initiatives for the fiscal year. I was just reading some of these. So we have Franklin Boulevard Phase 2. We have the wastewater master plan. We have the Jasper Trunk Phase 3, Mill Street reconstruction, Laura Street, which is a design right-of-way acquisition.
How long has Mill Street been going on? How long have they been constructing and designing Mill Street? That's been going on for years, hasn't it?
I can give a little.
Yeah.
So we originally got the funding for Mill Street awarded to us in 2017, I believe, in that cycle of federal funding. When we started to initiate this, so ODOT restructured the local agency program at that time. And so they started, so it used to be if you weren't a certified agency, ODOT just managed your projects. It was a pretty simple process. You went and got an IGA. Then they said, we don't have staff to do local agency projects, so you need to go to a certified local agency. There are the 2 Lane counties certified for some parts of the delivery of those projects, and Eugene is also. When we approached both of those agencies to deliver the project for us, and mind you, when we do that, not only do we have to pay ODOT, we have to pay that local agency as well. So just like we're hiring a consultant, and more than likely, they're gonna hire another consultant, so it just added cost to the project. But both of them told us because of also putting in the restrictions to spend money in a timely fashion, they said, we have too much work. We can't take on any new work. So we sat there spinning for a couple of years, then COVID hit, then we started initiation and ODOT finally came back and said, okay, we'll deliver the project. And it took us 2.5 years to get an IGA worked out with ODOT. So that's how we ended up where we are today. And we could not, so in that meantime, while we were awarded the funding, nothing was really occurring in design because you can't do anything on the project until you actually have an agreement with ODOT.
And I suspect your question was with regard to the amount of potholes that you're seeing out in Springfield city streets. And the ice storm,
Yeah.
really, set
Really
us back.
bad.
Ben has made it a priority with his crew chief and they're attacking, but we have thousands of them.
Any other questions for?
Just curious, if we could follow up on that issue about the TV inspection of the wastewater. collection system.
So, small portion was mechanical issues with aging equipment, that sort of thing. That's a small piece. The bigger piece isn't a lack of personnel, it's a lack of trained personnel. So operations hires through an apprenticeship currently. With the apprenticeship, there's a rotation that happens. To put it in perspective, about 75% of my crew is apprentices. So I don't get to keep them. They rotate, through Ben's groups and the various other groups, landscape and traffic. And currently, the city of Springfield, our TV operators are NASCO certified, which is a PACP certification. It's basically certification they go through that everybody is starting to use. So it's, it's an industry standard sort of aspect. That certification is important for operators, but I can't get people certified that aren't staying because they get certified, then they leave and I can't utilize them. I foresee those numbers are gonna go up. Our goals haven't changed. It's just as people start to journey out, we'll level out with our experience level. I don't have a lot of trained operators to train people because they're also training them to clean sewer lines, to clean catch basins. And so it's mainly just a lack of that experience level. It's really what it comes down to. Because CCTV is a slow process. Cleaning sewer lines, you can do 5,000 feet in a day versus, TVing, you may get 12 to 2,000 feet if you know what you're doing. So that training is a really slow process. And that's really what caused the numbers to drop. But the goals haven't changed and they won't because it's an important part of our preventative maintenance. So that's really what it comes down to. We have a very young or inexperienced crew in operations. So we're doing, we're utilizing the best of the abilities and as they learn and get that experience, those numbers are gonna go up.
So to put that into context, 60% of our staff is 3 years or less
Saw that in
experience.
there.
So they're coming along fast and they're amazing, but we have our limitations that limit us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Good job, man.
So I wanted to ask the group, do we want to continue to take break? 10-minute break?
I have no more questions.
I hate to break if we're not really going to continue, so.
You may have asked all ours.
Yeah.
Great.
Mine's public works as well.
Okay.
And you guys did all the answers and maybe I'm not seeing it, but I'm looking at the report, the DPW report and the numbers on that one. And then I look at the proposed budget and they're different and I'm just not sure. And they're big difference. So I know I must be seeing something wrong. So like, when I look under, street fund 201 on the major budget, which would be what, 43 of 240 or 33 of 230?
It's 43 on the bottom, the page in bottom.
33 of 230. So if I look at that, it shows 8.1 on fiscal year 25. But if I go to the DPW report that was separate, the numbers are seven point six. And that's under the financial summary by fund on that. And so the overall budget on that's like 63 point.
Can you give me a page number for the second page that you're looking at?
The second one doesn't have it doesn't have that. It just says it's like 10 of 19 because I just pulled that out. I just pulled the the single document for the Development Public Works.
I think that's the page.
And so I was trying to cross-reference the grand total on this one is 63.1, but if I look at the proposed budget major document, it's way more than.
So we're talking.
So I'm like,
100.
like 100.
You hold on to that. So give us some time to look into that. So it's a complex document. We think we get to a final point, and then someone shows up in our office and says we need to make a change. And then we gotta make sure that change finds its way through the entire document. And then they show up again a week later and say, gotta make another change, and just change over change, and sometimes we can lose some numbers. So we're gonna have to follow up and tie that up.
Okay, yeah, because 07 Development and Public Works total is 150. 593, but then when I look at the DPW. The 19-page report, it's 63, so it's like a big difference. So I'm thinking that I'm not looking at it correctly, is what I think. I think I'm looking at different X's and O's, right? So if you could tell me, if you can figure that out and let me know.
Great. Can we combine that
It's
with
a
that
big
other
difference.
question? Yeah,
Yeah, huh?
can we combine that? with
Yeah,
the
yeah,
other?
sure.
Okay.
And that's all I had. I just wanted to ask you guys those questions because those are the questions I'm being asked. And the public is wanting to know why they should have to fund a bond. And they need to hear from you, because I know what you're talking about. I understand that, that 3 cents on gas is just, they're not making the same thing they were back in 2003 when that got put into place, right? So I get it.
Generates $1 million a year.
But people need to hear why, and they need to know that we are doing a good job, that you guys are doing a good job. And I really appreciate the work that you do. I think you guys are awesome. And I really appreciate the staff utilizing the ARPA funds and helping update the the council chambers, because one of my biggest fears taking this position was the fact that we were literally trapped if somebody was to walk in there, and we know, unfortunately, in this day and age, that can happen. And I was very uncomfortable, and knowing now that I feel so much more safe that I'm more protected, and that the people that I sit up there with are protected. I really appreciate that. That means a lot.
Can I end on a positive note that references what you're talking about? So I remember Councilor Rodley speaking up amongst all of the saying how much they wanted to look back and say, we did something with that money. Well, we're about ready to complete a street light update replacement project. And that project is somewhere around 3.5 million probably by the time we get done. We're gonna spend less on energy, even though Subble, we're gonna go to a different rate of pay, but we're gonna save money on that. But the way that the city is illuminated and the comments we're getting about people feeling safer driving in that. So that we feel really proud to have delivered that. Brian Barnett, Scott Miller, and staff have been phenomenal working on that project. And the storm damage, the storm knocked down quite a few. More to come on that.
Any other comments? Well, with no other business, I officially adjourn the Springfield Budget Committee, and our next meeting will be held tomorrow. Thank you.